You're listening to the Journey podcast. Can we break free from the patterns of trauma and create healthy, fulfilling relationships? Listen to today's episode for an inspiring conversation on the transformative power of healing childhood trauma. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Intimacy is a fundamental human need, and the ability to trust and be vulnerable with others is a key component of building fulfilling relationships. However, for individuals who have experienced childhood trauma, this can be a challenging and complex process. Our guest, an expert in trauma and intimacy, shares her insights on the various ways childhood trauma can impact our ability to form and maintain intimate relationships, as well as the role of self-awareness in healing from these wounds. We discuss the importance of cultivating a sense of safety and trust in our lives, as well as the power of vulnerability, communication, and boundary setting in building healthy, fulfilling connections. In the last 20 years, Andrea Steigler has learned hundreds of methods and techniques all around the world from the best and most authentic teachers and masters. In her unique and holistic Empress-O method, she combines ancient traditions and methods learned from all over the world with modern trauma healing, transgenerational transformations, and grief recovery. By applying this unique holistic method, clients reach true transformation with rewriting their old stories and unleashing the full potential of the woman in themselves, which has already brought lifelong change to nearly 5,000 women worldwide. Andrea's areas of expertise include any type of trauma, abuse, codependency, and grief, and female organ issues with breast, yoni, body image issues related to self-love, self-acceptance, and self-worth. She has had a tremendous amount of successful transformation with myoma, cyst, womb polyp, vaginal infections, endometriosis, vaginismus, vulvodynia, infertility, and intimacy, sexuality, orgasm-related challenges. She was featured on Yahoo Top 10 as number 4 love coach across the world after star coach Matthew Hussey in 2021. Andrea has been invited as a special guest expert for Hungarian and international summits and podcasts, and she has her own video show series with her invited guests in Hungary called Women to Women with Honesty and No Taboos. Here is my interview with Andrea Steigler. Hi, Andrea. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because how childhood trauma affects intimacy is such an interesting topic for today's episode. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Petra, for inviting me. And I'm so honored to be here and talking about this very important topic because I feel that this is affecting on all of us and somehow it's affecting on our life right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And it's my pleasure to have you here today. And for starters, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and your own story?
Yes, I would like to share my long story short because I experienced so much in my life. And I was born in a small town in Hungary and with parents who didn't love each other. So all the arguments every single day. And when my brother was born, I felt less and less. And I wanted to be a good girl to my father, but I didn't feel his love. And later, when I became adult, then I realized that it was absolutely an abusive connection, also between my parents and also with us. And it's very interesting on my healing journey that I realized I experienced all kinds of abuse in all kinds of relationships. And it was a huge work up till now to heal all of these wounds, all of the traumas, what I've discovered up till now. And of course, there are more to come. That's why we are here in this life, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you touch a little bit on how you experienced this trauma as a child. Can you explain to listeners a little bit what trauma is and how that can show up for us from our childhood?
Yes, trauma is, I think more and more we are using the word, but Gabor Mate, I'm sure that so many people are, he's very well known all around the world. And he said one of his teachings that when people are going to cinema and after watching a film, they said, I'm traumatized. And he said that it's not true because trauma is something different. And if we are watching a movie, somehow it's effect on our emotions and our body, but somehow they are enlarged this. And also it could be the other edge of the situation when we are keeping as a secret what happened with us, even in our whole life. So somehow the trauma is misinterpreted and misunderstanding. So let's make a little bit clear what trauma is. So it's a Greek word and it means wounding, when a sudden or accidental event causes some serious physical injury or mental or emotional wound together with a strong shocking experience. So it can be like an accident, which is very common, or what we know, physical or sexual abuse, but also verbal abuse when we are receiving words which is judging or which is very negative, and when you feel that you are just freezing, oh my God, what shall I do? Or someone is shouting on you and you don't know what to do because you are just scared.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining that. And I find that very interesting. The explanation that when you go to the cinema and you say you're traumatized, because there are different kinds of traumas and we do experience them differently. And what are some of these effects that carry forward when we do experience traumas, especially in our childhood? How can that affect our intimacy and our safety as we grow up and then we go into adulthood?
Yes, so I thank you that you mentioned that we are experiencing differently, because the most important thing that how we are experiencing at that moment when the trauma happened with us. And it's easy to make it smaller than it happened with us at that moment. So for example, if I'm looking back, what happened to me, let's say 10 years ago, it's nothing to be, it's no touch. It's not triggering me at all. But at that moment, I was completely frozen and I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. And this, what happened in that moment, it's imprinted in our body. And we can react on, that this is the coping mechanisms could be different. And then I just mentioned, for example, the freezing. And the other, what is more common, the fight or flight. But also what I experienced that in our childhood, we cannot fight. We don't have enough braveness and power to fight when this kind of shocking experience is happening with us. The flight one is when we are running away, or what I also experienced in childhood, early childhood time, when we are just, for example, the pain is so huge, then we are not capable to handle it. And we are feeling an out of body experience. And both the froze and this flight experience cause some desensitization, and also that I don't feel at all in my body. I don't have connection, disconnecting from my body. And the fourth one is the pound. This is a new types of coping mechanism when we are becoming people pleaser, when we are not able to set our boundaries, or, that we are not able to say no to others and fully lose ourselves. So these are the coping mechanisms, to make it clear. And your question was how the trauma is affecting on our intimacy and safety. So I would also make a definition for intimacy, because there are all similar kind of misunderstanding around intimacy. And I would like to give a little bit wider and broader definition, because most of the time what I experience, as I'm an orgas coach, so working with a lot of sexuality, topic of sexuality or around sexuality or around orgasmic capacity. And what I experienced that especially in Tantra world or who are just entering the Tantra, they are thinking that intimacy is equal to sex. And it's much wider. And intimacy, as you mentioned, it's connected with safety. So intimacy, when I feel safe to be naked, and not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and also with my whole stories, with my heritage, with my ancestors, with my habits. So whatever I'm doing, I'm openly and freely can share without the fear that I will be judged or I will be abandoned or I will be neglected or rejected. So it's like I feel safe in my body. I feel safe with my emotions. I feel safe with my whole story and whole package, what I'm carrying, or the baggage with my whole ancestor or lineage. And it's really hard to do that, right? Mm-hmm. To open up anytime to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we experience issues in intimacy and that ability to be vulnerable, as you were saying, how do we know as adults that we have been traumatized? How does that come out in our lives? How does that show up? And how would we even know that we've been traumatized in childhood?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it's basically the first thing is that we're starting with myself and also intimacy. It's not about that I feel intimacy or I experience intimacy with someone. The first thing what I experience or where I experience intimacy is with myself, with my body, with my emotions, with my whole self. And if it's damaged somehow, so if trauma happened with me, basically first, there is dishonesty with myself. I lose trust in myself. For example, I lose trust in my intuitions. I feel body shame. I feel that I'm not able to express myself. I'm not able to set my boundaries. I don't feel safe in the room. I don't feel safe in my body. I don't feel safe with others. I have issues with my relationships, or even just I cannot handle different kind of situations and I'm running around in the same cycle. And it's very interesting how, and also maybe I will just point out how the safety could be lost.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, because just mention that intimacy when I can be open up, right? Then in this case, then I'm fully safe because I don't have fear that it will be misused. The information or the situation will be misused. And for example, I can be in intimate moment with a stranger, even with an eye connection. So it's kind of like we have the moment, a deep connection with our eyes, and we are continuing our life. But this was a really, really deep moment when I can open up without words, without touching. But somehow we had some really, really deep connection for just a moment. And when can I open up? When I feel relaxed. When can I feel relaxed? Like when I feel safe. And when do I feel safe? When I trust. When I can be honest, as I mentioned, without fear, without judgment, without rejection, without separation, without any negative emotions or feelings.
And when we feel like that is compromised, so as you're talking about intimacy and safety, and if we feel as adults that that is compromised, and you said there are several things that could show up, if you maybe have trouble with relationships or you are unable to set boundaries or different ways that that shows up, what can we do about that? Are there any tools or techniques that we could use for healing that childhood trauma?
Yes, absolutely. Luckily, there are so many tools and techniques, and there are so many experts all around the world. So basically, what I usually suggest, so the first thing, to find an expert who is really good in trauma healing and find a way which could create safety with this person, and also with the tools and techniques, what you feel that you could do that. And with happiness, not just like this is my homework and I have to do this. Because most of the time, this is how we can open up when we are feeling confident or kind of like comfort with the exercises or with the practices. And I'm also working holistically, which means that not just like a psychotherapist on the mental level, I'm also working on a somatic level. I'm working with the emotions. I'm working with the soul level. And this is the cycle when we are always repeating. And in a holistic level, when we are able to look at in all levels, then this is the way how we can absolutely jump in the old patterns, the trauma cycle, for example. I think the first step is always that I recognize that something is not working properly. I'm not healthy. I have not healthy and loving relationships. I have some issues with my body. It's really hard for me to get connection with self-love on any way. And it's also very important that be aware that trauma healing is not like happening in a moment or instantly. It needs work. It needs to face with our deep self, with our darkness, with very painful moments, what we put in a black box in our mind. But with opening this black box could help us to fully leave and release these baggages, what we are carrying since our childhood or even generationally. It's very important to be patient with ourselves and allow ourselves to go on our own rhythm and not comparing ourselves or our healing journey with others.
Yeah, that's a really good point because as you're talking about self-love also, if we do compare ourselves to others, we often will find that we don't give ourselves enough self-love and we don't nourish ourselves enough. So that certainly can interfere with trauma healing as well. And being supportive of yourself and taking your time and nourishing yourself certainly will help with that as well. Now, I would imagine that childhood trauma can have very widespread effects on your life. It can probably affect your mental health, your emotional well-being. It can even affect you physically. So what kind of changes do you see in people after they begin healing their childhood traumas? Do you find that it changes at all, changes their lives or changes their intimacy?
Yes, basically, when we start to work on one point, because everything is connecting with everything, then it will affect on everything. So it doesn't matter where we start to work on. Definitely it will affect on, as you mentioned, physical, emotional level, also on our relationships. The first moment when we start to feel that our traumas are healing, that our body is lighter, it's more sensitive, and also even we haven't experienced, we didn't know, we were not aware of that, how that we were not sensitive at all. And can you just share a story or a pattern what I think all we experienced since since we were a baby? Just explain how our sensitivity could change.
Yeah, did you want to give us an example maybe?
Basically, we are not thinking about then when we are a newborn baby. We were fully vulnerable. We were fully trusting everyone because we were not able to nurture ourselves. And every single day, our parents or caretakers were changing our diapers, right? And how they are touching our genitals. So they were touching our genitals every single day, at least 2, 3, 5, 10 times. And on the way they touched it, we were very hypersensitive and we were not able to express what we felt, only just with crying or laughter, right? And just imagine, even as an adult, you have changed any diapers on a baby, that how you touch the baby strongly, quickly, how you look at the baby's eyes, what you were saying at that moment. Maybe you were not present because you were talking about with someone, or it was a little bit smelly and, your face were different. So what the baby were reacting, I'm very sensitive and it's really, really good. It's really good. But the touch was very hard, was very quick. And the face on the adult was really strange. And even this adult told me something strange. So what I learned in this moment, I learned as a baby that I'm very hypersensitive. It was really good, but it was very painful. And I made something wrong because the face of this adult was really strange. And even he said something which I don't understand yet, but I feel that I did something wrong. So this could happen immediately, even a trauma for us, and decreasing our sensitivity. What I experienced, and that's why I mentioned, because I have a very special trauma healing massage. And when a lady, for example, she doesn't have an orgasm at all, and we start to discover through her body memory what happened with her, and even she didn't remember anything special, but maybe she had some painful experience or crampy menstruation cycle or any kind of female organ problems. Then when we start to discover through the body memory, these memories, usually they feel that in their body or in that area of where we are doing the massage, it started to be more vibrant. So the vibrations or feeling pulsating or feeling that they could breathe deeply. They feel some kind of like release, that their body or the cells or the muscles started to be more alive, more vital. So this is what I experience mainly on physical level.
Yeah, and what an interesting perspective. And thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is very important to be aware that it shouldn't be a very big accident or loss or a surgery or a near-death experience to have a trauma or sexual abuse or physical abuse, which is obvious, like let's say. It can be something which happened almost every day and we got used to it. And it's very important to see that these everyday moments could also lead us to fully feel disconnected from our body.
Yeah, and I think probably myself and also many listeners might not connect the fact that, when our parents were changing our diapers, that would have such a far-reaching effect on us. So I really appreciate you sharing that because I have never thought about that before. And now it really makes me think about that. That's so interesting. And you work with people on trauma healing, and you have clients whom you help with trauma healing, childhood trauma, their intimacy. And so do you want to share a little bit about your programs and services that you offer so that listeners can get an idea of how they could work with you?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity. And basically, I'm in Hungary right now. So physically, I can offer personal or one-on-one sessions or this special trauma healing massage here in Budapest. But online, I'm also doing one-on-one coaching and I have online programs, and soon I will also release a new program which trauma healing in our intimacy and also around sexuality. And on my website, you can also find the Live Your Best Orgasmic Life 6 weeks mastery program. In English, currently, this is the program which is available, and also the one-on-one session coaching program. And soon I will have this new mastery program. And I also have a free gift for our listeners.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is, as I mentioned, around safety. This is what I feel that this is the first moment, the first point, the first step, what we need to rebuild in our body and also in our connections. So I made a video series, How to Feel Safe. And this is what I would like to share and offer for our listeners.
Wow, thank you so much for your generous offering. And we will be sure to link the gift in the show notes as well. We will link to your programs and services there so that people know how they can get a hold of you and how they can work with you. And then we will also link to the gift. And I truly appreciate you offering that because I think many listeners might have experienced childhood trauma, like you said, and might not be aware of it as adults. And so starting to become aware of that and starting to look into that, I think would be wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I would also offer for our listeners that if you have any questions, just feel free to reach me out and I would be happy to share and help everything what I know, share my experience and knowledge, what I could help you.
Yeah, and you have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom around this topic. So I would definitely encourage any listeners who are curious to know more or who are thinking that they have experienced childhood trauma or they're working on their own healing journey to get in touch with you and make that contact, because I feel like you have such a wealth of information and knowledge around this topic, and it would be great for you to connect.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this was just a little piece of it and one aspect. So definitely there are much more complex. And it's also very important that we look at the trauma and also our body and also our life as a whole and not just pieces, because this is how we make the connections and this is how we find the solution for all these repeated circles, how we can get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great point that you're making, that, it does take time, and the trauma healing journey isn't something that just happens overnight. And there are many different aspects to it. So that's why I love what you're offering, because you address all these different parts and the different perspectives on it. So anyone who feels aligned with this episode and has listened and it has piqued your interest, be sure to get in touch with Andrea and talk with her about what's happening in your life. And this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have connected with this journey into childhood trauma and intimacy as profoundly as I have. It has been wonderful chatting with you on the podcast today, Andrea. Thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Petra, for inviting me, and thank you very much for our listeners to be with us until this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep doing what you're doing. Keep offering your programs and services. I see all that fantastic work that you're doing, and I really hope that we get to chat again, Andrea. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please subscribe, share on social media, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and the Journey blog. Sending you love and courage, and see you next week.